Alright, here we go for our last video of the day. And if you recall from our last video, we were looking at this. We got this explicit formula. F of x equals 3 times 2 to the x minus 1, which came from this geometric sequence up here, the 3, 6, 12, 24, 48. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, Mr. Wetman, that table was torture. I'd rather have been tased than go through that table one more time. If you're in that boat and you don't want to be caused pain, I've got a more painless way that we can go about this. But hopefully, the structure gives you an idea as to where this thing is going to come from. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look. Well, first I'm going to write our sequence here one more time so you can see it again. So I'll have to scroll back up. Okay. Now if we look at our explicit formula, I'm hoping you're noticing two things here. First, I hope you're looking and you're saying, wow, there's a 3 right here. And I wonder if just by some ironic chance that matches our initial value, or our initial term. Okay, and that's not by chance. Okay, that 3 is always, in a geometric sequence, going to be your initial term when we come up with these explicit formulas. Alright? And then, magically, this 2 popped up. And if you recall, that 2 was our common ratio. Okay? So we have our initial term of 3 right here times our common ratio 2, then raised to this exponent x minus 1. You might be thinking, oh man, that's a great coincidence that just happened. Well, it turns out, to save you all the trouble of that table kind of shows us where it came from, but it turns out that for any geometric sequence, okay, this is the awesome thing about geometric sequences. Once you identify it as geometric, for any geometric sequence, the explicit formula is the following. Okay? So we could just say, f of x again for our function equals the first term, or the initial term, and the way I'm going to write that is I'm going to write f of 1. That thing right there means your initial value, your initial term. Okay, so f of 1 times the common ratio r raised to the x minus 1 power. And that will work for any geometric sequence that you run into. Okay? So again, there's your common ratio, lowercase r. Alright, so quickly here, I'm going to give you a sequence. And, we'll go with 64, then 8, then 1, then 1 over 8, and so on. Alright? So our first, or our initial term here, if we want to find the explicit formula, okay, so finding the explicit formula, well, our initial term, which is going to be f of 1, that just means our first term in the sequence, is that value right there of 64. Okay, you may need to pause the video here for a minute and try and find that common ratio. So if you need to, take a moment here and pause. Okay, looking now at our common ratio. Common ratio r, well, how do you go from 64 to 8 to 1 to 1/8 and so forth? Well, you might say, well, we're dividing by 8. But a common ratio is specific. It says what number you multiply by, and instead of dividing by 8, we're going to say you're multiplying by 1 over 8. Okay, and those are the only things we need for our explicit formula. So our explicit formula for that sequence will be f of x equals our first term, which is 64, times our common ratio, and with the fraction, it's always good practice, especially when you're using the calculator, to put that fraction in parentheses. 1/8, which is our common ratio, to the x minus 1 power, and there's our common ratio. So if someone was to ask you, all right, there's that sequence, give me, find the 15th term in the sequence, well, you could simply just take your formula, your explicit formula, and say, well, the 15th term would be f of 15, so replace x, because x is whatever term in the sequence you're looking for, replace it with 15. Okay, so f of 15 would equal 64 times 1/8 to the 15, subtract 1 power, or you could simply write that as 64 times 1/8 to the 14th power. Okay, and then you could just throw that in the calculator and get out a value. It's going to be pretty small for you. Anyway, so that kind of wraps us up there for geometric sequences. Again, big things to remember: common ratio, initial term, and this guy right here, explicit formula. And so having this thing, well, I need to rewrite that. That doesn't look very clean. I'm going to rewrite it right here. Having this formula for a geometric sequence, f of x equals f of 1 times common ratio r raised to x minus 1 power. That is a wonderful thing to have circled or starred or something like that in your notes. All right, good stuff. Hope things go well in the homework. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me a chat, send me an email, get a hold of me. I'm happy to help.